Welcome to Mindful Talk, brief conversations about mindfulness in the workplace and at home. I am your host, Lauren Wessinger.
And I'm your host, Misti Anderson. And this podcast is brought to you by the Mindful Project.
The Mindful Project helps you elevate the culture of your business by bringing mindfulness practice to you and your staff through in-person and virtual learning. Contact us through our website, themindfulproject.co, for more information.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Mindful Talk. This episode is Mindfulness in Chronic Patients. And today I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Krishna. I'll let her, if you're watching YouTube, she can wave. Krishna is happens to be my very best friend. And I've gone along this journey with her. And as we've created this podcast, she's always in my head. Well, number one, because I bounce most of everything in my head off of her. But number two, because I've watched her mindfulness practice from the beginning to where it is now. And the evolution and the struggles that she's gone through are very tied to being a chronic disease patient. And it's helped her overcome some of those obstacles. And so I was like, hey, Lauren, we have this great resource who has experienced a lot of what so many people are going through out there, whether it's diabetes or whether it's Alzheimer's or whatever it is on the spectrum of things that can be considered chronic, mindfulness has helped her. And so our goal today is that her story and her advice and her journey can perhaps ignite something in you if you're struggling as a chronic patient. So Krishna is a wealth of knowledge. She's a very scientific person. She and I actually were pharmaceutical reps together way back in the day, like the fun days of pharmaceuticals that you hear about, spend all the money on the doctors kind of things. We were together in those days and it was super fun. And I got to know her. And that was actually before she was diagnosed. And then we kind of moved into this area of life where she knew something was wrong and she started the testing. And man, was that a journey. And she didn't practice mindfulness in that time of our life. I didn't even practice mindfulness at that time in life. And so she muddled her way through this terrible time of trying to get a diagnosis because she has as she will explain, a very rare disease. And so had she had mindfulness back then, gosh, I think about that piece of the journey, but thankfully she's found it and she's here today to share her story. So I'm really happy to have you. And I think it would probably be best to let our listeners know, what truly defines a chronic patient. So welcome.
Thank you. And yeah, boy, sometimes I really miss those days, but then other times I really don't. So just to give you an idea of what a chronic patient is, it's technically defined as anything ongoing for more than 3 months. So when you think of chronic patients, it doesn't have to be for life. So you can also throw in cancer or obesity, some things that you can get under control or maybe go into remission. You're never really cured of those things because also when part of the definition is they tend to be more frequent as we age. There's also no cure or a vaccine or anything that can take away this disease. And they're also not cured by medications or surgery. I know that's a little confusing when it comes to cancer, but if any of y'all, which I don't know who wouldn't, know anybody that's had cancer, once you have cancer, you're never really free of it. You still have to have scans. You still have to have appointments. You still have to. So that's why something like cancer fits the bill, even once you go into remission. There are approximately, and I know this is just kind of an arbitrary number, 120 million patients in the United States alone that have a chronic disease. So the way that I picture that is if you're in the grocery store and you see 10 people, just 10 people, which who doesn't see 10, there's usually at least 10 people working. 4 of those people have a chronic disease. So that's a lot of people. And I also make that point because if you look at me right now, I don't look sick. I don't look like I have anything wrong with me. Yet I have one of the rarest diseases that there is in this country. So, think about that as far as, everybody is going through something. Well, 4 out of those 10 people are really going through something. So that kind of puts it back on how to think about when you just see a group of people, how many people are impacted by that.
Ugh, it's so crazy. 4 people like right there in front of you. Think about how many people you
Exactly.
pass at the grocery store. And,
Yep.
when you say chronic, it's like you said, there's varying degrees of it and how long have they had it and things like that. So I think everybody would be really curious to find out about your actual specific disease. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Sorry. So I am, out of those same 10 people at the grocery store, one person, one of those 4, has a disease that's listed on the rare disease list. There's only 7,000 different diseases worldwide on that list. So I know that sounds like a lot of different diseases, but what you have to remember is a very small number of people have an actual rare disease. Just to give you an idea, things like MS, not a rare disease. What I have is actually called, and I'll refer to it in the future as MMN because it's a mouthful to say every time. But what I have is multifocal motor neuropathy with conduction block. Blah, blah, blah.
And what does that mean for all of us?
Exactly. So, first of all, to tell you how truly rare, special, unique, whatever you want to call me, it is for me to have it, is that it's actually 2 times more men than women have it, and less than 1 in about 300,000 people. So I'm like half of one, a half a person in 300,000 people. Oh. So it's extremely rare. It really is. And what it does is I have some proteins in my body that, for some weird unknown reason, they attack the ends of the sheaths of my nerves, primarily in my arms, legs, hands, and feet. Although as you're watching this and the more I talk, you might notice I have a little tick in my tongue. I also do have some damage in my tongue. And it causes, we almost all know what neuropathy is. So all those general things, the tingling, the numb, sometimes it feels like little pinpricks. When I wake up, for example, I kind of have to exercise my hands just to get them to work before I can pick up my phone and look at Misty's texts. And then it also does cause extreme muscle atrophy, which means that basically my nerves are not talking to my muscles. So like I could never be in a bodybuilding competition. I could never have, those super awesome arms or back or legs that, a lot of the people that we see on TV or people that work out really hard. That's just not a possibility for me, because my brain has to send that signal to my muscle about 20 times where yours has to send it once. So it's not excruciatingly painful all the time. There is some pain involved, but I also don't want to just get hung up on pain, because a lot of times people think that chronic patients are in pain all the time and that we can't walk or we, can't lift things. We can't exercise. We can't. And that's definitely not the case. I can still do all those things. I just have to really remember my limits. I would say honestly that the biggest impact it has on me physically is the fatigue. And that's something that does go along with a lot of chronic diseases or illnesses. But there are literally some days, even with all my medication, that I can't get off the couch. And it's not that I'm tired and want to go to sleep. It's that my body is just, you know how you feel like the day after you work out really hard for the first time? That's what it feels like.
Ugh, you are so unique, by the way.
Yeah.
And we'll use not rare, very unique. So how do you just briefly, how do you manage that?
Sure. So I have 7 different prescription meds that I take daily and about 10 supplements. So it took, I was diagnosed in 2013, and it took probably 3 years just to find the cocktail of meds and supplements that would help me, namely with that fatigue, but also help me with some of the symptoms. And then once a week, I also do an infusion. I do it here at home by myself. So I used to have to go to an IV center or have an IV nurse come, but thanks to the wonders of modern medicine, now there is a sub-Q form. And what that means is that there's no other way to say it. I put 6 tiny needles in my legs or my abdomen once a week, and the medication absorbs into my fat and then absorbs into my bloodstream. And my medication is actually made from plasma. So thank you to all those plasma donors out there. And if anybody really wants to think of something that they can do that you maybe haven't thought of before, if you're a fairly healthy person, please go donate plasma. It's life-saving and life-changing. So, and I do that every Wednesday. So like today is actually infusion day.
Nice. Well, it's a perfect conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. So I know this, but for the listeners, she's juggling. I know you hear it too. She's juggling a lot. She's juggling not just pain and what's happening to her body, but the infusion piece of it, and where did those supplies come from, and how did she get them, and the insurance. It's like your brain starts tumbling. So I know today we're able to have this conversation and she's not a frazzled mess. And that's because she practiced mindfulness. But back in 2013, that wasn't the case. So tell me a little bit how you started practicing mindfulness.
Sure. Well, I'll just be honest, I owe it all to you. I was at a point where, just to kind of piggyback on the plasma donation, if you haven't donated plasma, you might not even know anybody that's donated plasma. So you can imagine how hard it is to make this infusion. And let me also be straight, because remember at the beginning when I said a chronic patient, it can't be cured by meds. So what this plasma does for me is it actually slows the progression of my disease down. It does not cure it. There is no cure. There is no cause. So my very first experience with mindfulness was after having several years of this very successful, career. I had been let go from 3 jobs when I was leading my district in sales. I was making the company money hand over fist. I was doing really well myself, yet they kept finding tiny reasons to fire me. So I looked into it, and lo and behold, the cost of my medication is about $35,000 a month. So that's hard. That's hard for any company to absorb. And I also don't want to be that person that makes everybody else's insurance double every year. So I took a leap, and I decided that I was going to quit working and try my hardest to get on disability, because then I knew that my medication would always be covered. And I felt at that time that that was my only choice. So at that time, Misty and her husband offered me a job nannying her daughters. And for any of you familiar with the system, there is a 2-year wait before you can actually get Medicare. And so it was a long, excruciating 2 years. I didn't have treatment. I was able to keep up on my medications just because of things like GoodRx. But there was I didn't have insurance. I didn't have anything. It was actually the hardest part of this, even worse than the diagnostic process, because I knew there was a treatment out there that could help me, but it was not attainable. And I'll never forget the day that Misty came home and said, you know what? I don't think I want to do this anymore. And she said, I think that I'm going to do something more for myself that can help others. And that's when she decided to become a certified yoga instructor. And that led to her looking at meditation and mindfulness a lot more, which, I mean, naturally, like she said at the beginning, we're kind of each other's right hand, led to me really starting to embrace some of those practices. And what I felt is that I could breathe a little bit more every day. Like, I had a deadline. This isn't so bad. I can mark the X's off the calendar and know, rather than looking at how many X's I had yet to make, I was able to look at all the X's that I had made. It made every single day more bearable. So that's kind of how I got started.
That makes me feel so good. And I promise you guys, of course, I knew that she's told me this before, but I didn't have her on so that she toot my horn. But it feels nice to pay it forward. And we've discussed before on this podcast, that's what mindfulness does. It's a beautiful trickle of, I just was working on myself. Seriously, I was just working on myself, changing my life, my family's story, my story. And then she is a beautiful, like, extra, in all of that. And so it just makes me really happy. Do you have a time? Because like I kind of have an aha moment of when my mindfulness practice was really starting to work. Do you have any moment or around that time where you were like, it's grounded in this,
I do. I would say it was probably after that long 2 years, and I was able to get my first treatment. And let me tell you, I have never loathed and loved something near as much as I do infusion. But because of some of the connections, both personal and professional, that I had made in the past, I was able to be nothing but joyful and at peace. And and at that time I was still doing an IV. So I'm taking 8 hours on a Saturday and Sunday or whatever day of the week, 8 hours each day, and doing this infusion. So, 4 days a month, I was hooked up to an IV. And it was crazy because on the second day, I looked at my infusion nurse and I said, this doesn't even bother me anymore. Like, I don't get anxious about it. It doesn't scare me. I'm not worried about anything. I'm just grateful.
Your gratitude practice, which has grown so much. And we've discussed that too before, like gratitude gets you through so much, and health stuff is a really big one for me as well. Okay. So we're running low on time.
Okay.
I want to ask you this. So I know the chronic patients are out there now and they're asking, okay, what can I do? How can I start to help this so that I can manage all the things that come along with being a chronic patient? Do you have any best practices and advice for those people?
I do. I actually made kind of a little list because I can be long-winded. So I wanted to be to the point on this. For anybody that watches Good Morning America, Robin Roberts has a saying that her mom used to say to her, and it's make your mess your message, which I absolutely love. And that's what I've tried to do. If anybody sees my Instagram story, it's really about infusion. It's about what I go through. It's about donating plasma. It's about rare diseases. So I try really hard to take what I have and hopefully let other people learn and maybe have a little more compassion, be mindful of those 4 people in the grocery store. Like if somebody is not in the best mood and they're checking you out, it might be because their disease is flaring up. So here's what I do. Mindfulness to me is I practice paying close attention to my experiences in the moment. Because if I try to look ahead, then anybody that tries to look ahead is going to be so anxious of everything that can go wrong. So even as I'm sticking myself 6 times with those needles, I'm thinking, I got to do this right now. In 3 hours, I'll be done, and then I'll feel better. And that's it. I also have really learned how to love myself again, and not do the why me thing, because there's no explanation for that. There just isn't. I don't let my illness define me. Yes, I have limits, but I don't let it be an excuse. And to all of you out there, if you have a friend or a family member with a chronic disease, keep asking them to do things. Keep asking them to come over. Keep asking them to go to dinner, because one day they're going to feel good enough to do it. And I can't tell you how important that is as the patient. I also have made myself aware that the illness is a human condition. So we're all human. So everybody should be able to relate to that. Like if you stub your toe, it hurts. So imagine stubbing your toe 27,000 times a day. That might be what that one person in the grocery store is going through. I also am open to unconventional ways to manage my illness, such as mindfulness and meditation. A lot of people rely heavily on medication only. And trust me, I rely heavily on my medication. But without mindfulness and meditation, I would still be angry about having this disease. I also try to find ways to help other people. Like I said, just awareness, spread awareness, like what we're doing right now. And that when I started down this road, that was my ultimate goal, was if I could just make one other person aware, then that would make me really happy. Find a support system. If your friends and family just aren't getting it, I promise you there's a support group for it somewhere. Even my disease has support groups on Facebook and Instagram, and there's tons and tons and tons of resources out there with simple Google search. So find a support system so that you don't feel alone. I would say, back to gratitude, live a life of gratitude instead of expectations. So I know when I stick myself those 6 times every week, I'm not going to be able to go outside and run 10 miles. That's an unrealistic expectation, but I can be grateful that I can walk 1 mile, because without it, I couldn't do that. So I'm grateful for that. I also would say, give yourself some grace. If you're a patient, a caregiver, a friend, and sometimes you might get tired of hearing the patient talk about it all the time. That's normal. Give yourself some grace in that area. Don't feel guilty about it. Saying no to people is really hard for me. So that's the area that I really find that I have to focus on, giving myself some grace. It's okay for me to say no, because I'm having one of those days that I just can't get off the couch. It just happens. And then last, and this has been the very, very hardest, you need to be able to let go of the life that you had planned. Because, we've all heard and we all know life can throw you a curveball, and life can do this and life can do that. But when your life is abruptly interrupted by a disease that you didn't expect that you would have, and you didn't really want, and you don't really understand, it can take a toll on your mental health. So I have finally been able to let go of the life that I had planned. The corporate world and the big house and the tons of money and the even working so hard to get a college degree. But that's okay, because my life is still wonderful because of all those other things that I've done and the way that I've changed my mindset through mindfulness and my support system.
I mean, I got teary. So one of the things I just, as a mindfulness coach, want to make sure and recognize, because this was a struggle for myself as well. When you get into meditation, a lot of chronic patients physically struggle with, sitting and etc. You be comfortable and close your eyes. It's that simple. It's inside of you. You have all the power, right? And so when things get hard, and you're faced with feeling different, going through struggles that other people don't understand, feeling bad about yourself because of what she said, or you're struggling with letting go, just close your eyes and sit, because you can work through some of that. And as you slowly start to do that, you become aware of times that you're feeling bad about yourself because of your former self. So I really, really appreciate you being with me today. I hope everybody enjoyed this, got something out of it. Krishna, where could everybody find you and connect with you online?
I am at Krishna Morris on Instagram, so you can find me there. And I am, and no, I'm not making this up. My name is Krishna Dick on Facebook, and my profile is public. And occasionally, of course, I sneak in some celebratory moments in my life and my family's life. But I am largely using my social media platforms now to help spread awareness. And just like I said, to maybe be that person that lets somebody else know they're not alone.
That's what I was going to say. Hook up with her, connect with her. She's a great human. She's also very, very smart when it comes to like healthcare in the system and, how you manage the system. So if you're drowning in that, reach out to her just for some support. So thank you so much, Krishna. You're a beautiful soul. You bring so much light and love to my world. And I hope everybody out there has a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to Mindful Talk. We don't take it lightly that you spent your time listening to our podcast, and we are forever grateful. If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and a review. Welcome to a more mindful way of living and working.